Hi YouTubers, thrill seekers, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, unwanted pets and relatives. It's Mr. Palumbo here. As summer's coming to an end, I'm feeling a little sad because this might be my last video for a while. But I'm really excited about the material. We're going to discuss capitalism versus socialism. Now, I've invited somebody special, personally, to help us with this episode. All right, Rambo, you ready? Got your gun? All right, now look, I personally invited Rambo for two reasons. First of all, if anyone has experience fighting socialists, it's Rambo. And two, if we invite him personally, he won't jump out in the middle of an episode and scare us. Now, I realize some of you parents might be a little apprehensive about having Rambo around. He has got a very large gun, and he's kind of a violent guy. So, if you're not comfortable with Rambo being here, I want to personally promise you that no blood or carnage or violence will ever be in a Professor Liberty video. However, if you don't want Rambo in the video, I'm going to give you a few minutes to tell him yourself why he should not be part of this video. Go ahead. Change your mind? I thought so. In this episode, we're going to talk about the three main criticisms of capitalism, and I'm going to try to refute those, and Rambo's basically going to destroy them literally. So let's get started. Capitalism is an economic system in which private individuals own the means of production and distribution of goods and services. The word capital in economics means things that you use to make other things. A lot of times we say money is capital because you can use money to buy buildings and trucks and factories and machinery. But capitalism is a system in which private individuals own the means of production and distribution. All market economies experience periods of expansion or growth and contraction or recession. We call these cyclic fluctuations the business cycle. There are four main components to the business cycle: expansion or boom, peak, recession, and trough. Think of expansion as times are good, people have money, and labor is desired. So factories are hiring more people, and because demand is high, they're also paying more money. After the peak, which is the highest point of the expansion, supply tends to outpace demand. People have surplus. They have to lay off workers. They have to discount their materials. And if it gets deep enough, you go into a recession where unemployment is high. Business cycles are the normal thing that occurs in a free society because economies are made of people. We all make thousands of decisions simultaneously, millions of people all the time. So supply and demand are not always going to be in equilibrium. And businesses have to adjust to those fluctuations. Think of this in terms of a home budget. Maybe your mom and dad get a raise. And because of the raise, they take you to Disneyland and they buy a big house and a new car. That would be the expansion. Maybe the boom would be the two new cars. But then say 1 month or a couple months, mom and dad spent too much money. Or there was an emergency and the income was cut in half. Well, then they would go into a recession or a contraction period. All the luxuries, like maybe cable, would be turned off, and they would have to try to find a way to get back into a budget, a controllable budget. These are things corporations do on a national or international level, just as we do on a personal home budget level. Some argue that overspending or investment causes bubbles, which are exaggerated or inflated booms, which eventually burst. Others, like socialists, claim that it's the rich exploiting the poor, but I would argue that government, fiscal, and monetary policies are often what cause these exaggerated booms and busts. For example, the Community Reinvestment Act, signed into law by Jimmy Carter and expanded under Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. This policy forced banks to make risky loans to people who otherwise could not afford the loans, thus exaggerating the demand for housing and creating a housing bubble. With interest rates low, people were able to enjoy cheap mortgages, but as soon as the interest rates rose, people defaulted on their loans and started the Great Recession of 2008. Booms and busts often occur under government meddling in the economy. This is because anytime the government does something, there's going to be a reaction, and not a lot of times you don't really know what the reaction is going to be. Unfortunately, once a boom is exaggerated, there's ultimately going to be an equally exaggerated bust. So I think we can see that, yes, booms and busts occur naturally. But if the government would stay out of the economy, even though it has good intentions, maybe these booms and busts wouldn't be so severe. I think we can put this criticism to bed. Go ahead, Rambo. Give it to him. Inflation is the decrease of the purchasing power of the dollar due to the overwhelming amount of dollars in the system. Basically, $1 cannot buy what $1 used to be able to buy because the value of that dollar has decreased. In other words, inflation is when things get more expensive because money has less value. Some call this a hidden tax on the poor and the low income because they can buy less and less with the already small incomes they possess. One of the main components of inflation was the abandonment of the gold standard. With the abandonment of the gold standard and the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, the government was no longer bound by the amount of gold and silver they had in their vaults, and subsequently could now print as much money as they wanted, thus skyrocketing inflation. You're probably thinking to yourself, he's just beating up on government, 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 government. Well, if the shoe fits, we need to wear it. I think you'll see that inflation is a government-caused, again, trying to help the economy, but it's a government-caused phenomena, if you will. And I think you'll see when we talk about socialism later, socialism has got way more inflation than capitalism does. Probably the most popular, and I would argue the most inaccurate criticism of capitalism is that it is based on selfishness and greed and exploitation. This idea became popular at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century when capitalism was basically unfettered. This brought about the existence of the progressive movement who sought to use government to curb capitalism and make society quote unquote more fair. Even though it's a basic fact that capitalism has produced more wealth and has increased the living standards of more people than any other economic system known to mankind, Critics still like to claim that capitalism is inherently unfair and only benefits the super rich. Politicians like to use this conflict as a way to win votes and often distract people from the poor jobs they are doing and the false promises they have not lived up to. The criticism of capitalism is based on greed is mostly just for political gain. To claim that everybody who simply wants to better their lives are greedy is just nonsense. And I often tell my students, well, if capitalists are being greedy, how are socialists not being greedy by wanting to take other people's money? We also have to talk about this term fair. Politicians and socialists like to say, well, it's not fair. Well, fair is a subjective term. What's fair to you might not be what's fair to me. And we certainly shouldn't let the politicians decide what is fair. We should have a society where everyone gets an equal shot and an equal opportunity. But no politician and no economic system is going to make everything fair. Life, unfortunately, as your mom and dad have said, is not fair. Some people are born with money. Some people aren't. Some people are born with disabilities. Some people aren't. Is that fair? No. But we have to use what we've been given, and we have to do the best we can with what we have. I also want to talk about this idea that the rich are exploiting the poor. Are there greedy rich people? Yes. Have rich people exploited the poor? Yes. But can the poor exploit the rich? Yes. And have you ever got a job from a poor person? Have you ever got a raise from a poor person? Stop making bad guys out of all the rich people. And we need to stop exploiting the poor. Capitalism is not perfect. It's created by man, so it's never going to be a perfect system. But capitalism is the best system to provide the most opportunity for the most people.